Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me today to discuss ethics in action. The topic of the day is Article 3 of the Code of Ethics. And this is a very interesting one, which issues come up on a daily basis for us, particularly about this article. Article 3 is important because it's an everyday occurrence. So what does this mean to you? Knowing the code of ethics, it means that every realtor with whom you work has voluntarily agreed to abide by the code of ethics based on professionalism and protection of the public. Realtors are subject to disciplinary action and sanctions if they violate the duties imposed by the code of ethics. So today, Article 3 states that realtors shall cooperate with other brokers except when cooperation is not in the client's best interest. The obligation to cooperate does not include the obligation to share commissions, fees, or to otherwise compensate another broker. So basically what this says is that we have an obligation to cooperate, but we are not obligated to compensate. So how does this work in real life? As members of the multiple listing service, the rules and regulations that apply to the multiple listing service state that every listing that we have in a particular territory that is covered by that multiple listing service has to be entered, and the rules and regulations of the multiple listing service states that when entered into the multiple listing service, it is for promoting to other members, and that requires compensation. So we have two different issues here. We have the code of ethics that says we have to cooperate, but not necessarily have an obligation to compensate. But as members of the MLS, we have an obligation to do both. So that makes it a little bit confusing. Standard of Practice 3.1 states the realtors acting as exclusive agents or brokers of the seller or landlord establish the terms and conditions of offers to cooperate. Unless expressly indicated in offers to cooperate, cooperating brokers may not assume that the offer of cooperation includes an offer of compensation. Terms of compensation, if any, shall be ascertained by cooperating brokers before beginning efforts to accept the offer of cooperation. So what I want to do now is basically explain what that whole sentence means. The listing agent working on behalf of the seller or the landlord makes the decision together with the seller or landlord, because we cannot act on our own. We are working on the best interest, for the best interest of the client. So we cannot establish how much we cooperate with other agents unless our client, the seller or landlord, is informed of what we are going to be offering. Our multiple listing services have an additional attachment or a paragraph within the commission compensation area that states how much we are going to be cooperating with the other broker, and the seller is aware of that. Okay, and the reason that was necessary to be added is because real estate agents were taking advantage in not informing the seller of what was being offered out. Okay? All right. So it is the listing agent who determines how much will be the cooperation with the approval and agreement of the seller. But a cooperating broker, according to the standard of practice, cannot assume that that cooperation includes compensation. And also the terms of that compensation have to be established. So any buyer's agent or transaction broker working with a buyer wanting to show the property and start negotiations or making offers on that property has a right to know ahead of time how much is the compensation that will be offered to them. Now, how much is the compensation should never be a determining factor for a buyer's agent whether they decide to show the property or not. Because in that case, they would be violating the obligation they have to their buyer. Okay? But in this particular situation, we need to make sure we understand that as the listing agent, it is the listing agent who determines how much will be offered out. I'm going to give you a case interpretation which specifically relates to this. A listing agent charges their seller a commission of whatever percent. Okay. Then the agent decides that they are going to offer less than half of that commission to the buying agent or the buyer's agent or transaction brokers. Okay. The buyer's agent has a right to know exactly how much it is that they're getting paid. Okay. Regardless of how much the listing agent has decided with their seller that they are going to be keeping for their marketing and listing efforts. The buyer's agent does not have a right to come in and try to renegotiate that agreement or to make an offer or request an offer of compensation that is different than what the listing agent already has offered. Okay? On Standard of Practice 3.2, it states that any change in compensation that is offered for cooperative services must be communicated to the other realtor prior to the time that the realtor submits an offer to purchase or lease the property. So we as listing agents cannot wait until we receive an offer and then say, oh, by the way, I made a reduction to the commission and thank you for bringing me the offer, but now you're going to get paid less. That would be definitely grounds for an unethical complaint that the buyer's agent can make. And because any communication has to be given before the offer has been presented. That doesn't mean that there could be a possibility that after the offer is presented, there is a need to make a change to the commission. Okay? After a realtor has submitted an offer to purchase or lease the property, the listing broker may not attempt to unilaterally modify the offered compensation. So the buyer's agent is protected by this in knowing that the commission that was offered at the time that the offer was made is the amount that they could expect to get for that commission. Okay. Now, when it comes to Standard of Practice 3-3, it explains that Standard of Practice 3.2 does not preclude the listing broker and the cooperating broker from entering into an agreement to change the compensation later on. So this is where I was referring to, where you're already in the transaction, maybe the seller is short some money, there's some some kind of a credit that is given, and that creates a hardship for the seller. There is nothing preventing both agents, the listing broker and the cooperating broker or buyer's agent, from agreeing to make a reduction on that commission. Okay, so I want to give you a case interpretation that happened a few years ago, but it's still very timely. A realtor listed a property for sale and put it in the multiple listing service. The data sheet indicated the compensation that the realtor was offering to the other participating agents if they were the successful agent in finding the buyer for the home. During the next few weeks, the realtor authorized several participants of the multiple listing service, including Realtor Charles, to show the property to potential buyers. Although several showings were made, there were no offers to purchase at that time. The listing realtor and the seller then decided to discuss the possible means of making the property more sellable and agreed to reduce the listed price. The listing realtor also agreed to lower his commission. The realtor changed his compensation offer in the multiple listing service and called the MLS participants who had shown the property previously and advised them that he had modified the offer of compensation to cooperating brokers. When the realtor Charlie that had shown the property received the call, he responded that he was working with a prospect who appeared to be very interested in purchasing the property, who would probably make an offer to purchase in the next day or two. Realtor Charlie, again, this is the one who showed the property, indicated that he would expect to receive the compensation that had been published originally in the multiple listing service, and that he was not willing to agree to the reduced amount that was being offered now, since he had already shown the property to one of the prospects, and he expected an offer to purchase would be made shortly. The listing realtor responded that since the prospect had not signed an offer to purchase, the modified offer of compensation would be applicable. The following day, Realtor Charlie wrote an offer to purchase for the same prospect that had seen the property previously. The offer was submitted to the seller and it was accepted. At the closing, the listing realtor gave the buyer's agent, Realtor Charlie, a check for the services in an amount reflecting the commission that was modified. Realtor Charlie refused to accept the check, indicating that he felt that the listing realtor's actions were in violation of the code of ethics. He filed a complaint with the Board Grievance Committee alleging violation to Articles 2 and 3 and citing Standard of Practice 3-2 in support of the change. Because of this situation like this, is that Standard of Practice 3-3 was one of the reasons that this was implemented. During the hearing, Realtor Charlie stated that the listing realtor's modification of the compensation constituted a misrepresentation through concealment of pertinent facts, since he had not provided Realtor Charlie with specific written notification of the modification prior to the time that Realtor Charlie began his efforts to interest the purchaser in the listed property. The listing realtor defended his actions by indicating that timely notice of the modification of compensation had been offered and had been provided by telephone prior to Realtor Charlie obtaining a signed offer to purchase. The listing realtor also indicated that his modified offer of compensation had also been promoted or posted to all participants through the multiple listing service. And the listing realtor also noted that in the accordance to standard of practice 3-2, the modified compensation offer had been communicated to Realtor Charlie prior to the time the purchaser signed an offer to purchase. The listing realtor also commented that Realtor Charlie produced the signed offer to purchase prior to the listing realtor communicating the modified offer. Then the listing realtor would have willingly paid the amount originally offered. Based on the evidence that was presented, the hearing panel concluded that the listing realtor had acted in accordance with the obligations expressed in Standard of Practice 3-2 and consequently was not in violation of Articles 2 or Articles 3 of the Code of Ethics. So I want to impress upon you the importance of making the change to the multiple listing service if there is an agreement with the seller to lower the commission that is being offered to the cooperating brokers in a timely manner. If the offer comes in before the change is made, you are obligated to pay the original compensation. Okay. As far as the commissions, I'm going to go on to the next Standard of Practice 3-4, and this is very, very, very important. Realtors acting as listing brokers have an affirmative obligation to disclose the existence of dual or variable rate commission arrangements. This happens when you list a property and you say to the seller, if it is sold through the multiple listing service, the amount of commission will be X%, and that will be shared between two different companies. But Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if I were to sell the property myself, I am willing to reduce the commission, and you will be netting more for the same offer. That is basically the very short explanation for a dual commission or variable commission arrangement. So depending on who sells the property, there is a different commission that is paid out by the seller at the closing. The listing broker shall, as soon as practical, disclose the existence of such arrangements to potential cooperating brokers and shall, in response to inquiries from cooperating brokers, disclose the differential that would result in a cooperative transaction in a sale or lease that results through the efforts of the seller or the landlord. So basically, you might have an arrangement with the seller where, let's say, if the seller finds the buyer themselves, there is a low commission that is paid. If the listing agent produces the buyer, there is a little bit more that is offered, that is paid in compensation. But if it is sold through the multiple listing service, the commission is higher. Any of these scenarios, for the same amount of offering price, would result in a different net to the seller. And this is what needs to be disclosed. In the multiple listing service, we do have a box where it says, do you have a variable or dual commission arrangement? And agents know when they see the letter yes or Y for yes, that this is being communicated to them. You do not have to do anything else besides that. However, if an agent calls and says, I would like to know what is the differential if I sell the property as opposed to what the dual commission is, or the other, the buyer coming from a different source, such as either the seller themselves or the listing agent, you do in this instance have an obligation to disclose whether it is 0.5%, 0.25%, 1%, 2%, or whatever is the case. Okay? If the cooperating broker is a buyer's or tenant's representative, the buyer or tenant's representative must disclose such information to the client before the client makes an offer to purchase or lease. So this is also information that the buyer has a right to know, because if their offer is going to be at a disadvantage because of the commission that is paid out, they have a right to know whether they have an opportunity to maybe make up that difference in either an increased sale price or purchase price, or in negotiating with the buyer's agent for a reduced commission in that situation, so that the buyer's offer can be seen in a better light. There was a case that was, well, actually, this has happened several times, but there was one that happened several years ago that still is very relevant to this particular situation, and it is case interpretation in which Realtors A and B were members of the same multiple listing service. Realtor A cooperating with Realtor B, and the listing agent was Realtor B, presented an offer to purchase signed by buyers offering the listed price, and it included a check for earnest money. The only contingency that this offer had was the mortgage contingency. The Realtor A shared with Realtor B the qualifying information about the buyers, indicating that they would have no problem securing a mortgage. The listing Realtor returned the offer to Realtor A with the words rejected were written on it and initialed by the seller, and explained that the seller had accepted another offer that had been secured by himself. Realtor A inquired about the seller's reasoning for rejecting the full price offer and with only a mortgage contingency, and the listing Realtor responded that he did not know, but with equal offers, he supposed the sellers would favor the offer secured by the listing broker. The Realtor who had submitted the offer met the seller at a social event, and the seller thanked him for his efforts in connection with the offer he had submitted, and the seller hoped that he understood that there was nothing personal in his decision to accept the other offer, adding that the money he saved through his special arrangement with his listing Realtor had been the deciding factor. When Realtor A asked about the special arrangement, the seller explained that he had a listing agreement for the sale of his property which authorized the submission to the multiple listing service and specified a certain amount of compensation. However, the seller stated that he also had signed an addendum to the agreement specifying that if the listing Realtor sold the listing through his own office, a percentage of the agreed compensation would be discounted to the seller's credit, resulting in a lower commission and a higher net to that seller. Realtor A filed a complaint with the Board of Realtors citing violation of Article 3 After review, the grievance committee requested an ethics hearing to be arranged. And all in all, each party presented their case. The hearing panel agreed that it was the listing realtor's right to establish his fees and charges as he saw fit. The multiple listing service could not interfere, nor could the Board of Realtors. However, the hearing panel noted that his complete freedom to establish charges for his services did not relieve him of his obligation to fully disclose the real terms and conditions of the compensation that was offered to other participants of the multiple listing service. The listing agent or listing broker was found guilty and in violation of Article 3 of the Code of Ethics. So it's very, very important that this dual compensation agreements or arrangements are disclosed in the MLS and disclosed to other agents if they come in and they're not sure what is going on. Standard of Practice 3-5 states that it is the obligation of subagents to promptly disclose all pertinent facts to the principal's agent prior to as well as after a purchase or lease agreement is executed. For us in New Jersey, subagents, we work as subagents when we are working in the same company, where one agent for Realty Executives takes the listing, and another agent from Realty Executives has the buyer. We are in essence working as sub-agents of the seller. And any information we know that could jeopardize the transaction has to be disclosed to the principal's agent, in other words, the listing agent, as well as during, before, during, and after the purchase or sale agreement is executed. In Standard of Practice 3-6, Realtors shall disclose the existence of accepted offers, including offers with unresolved contingencies, to any broker seeking cooperation. And in this one, I have to go into a newer case interpretation that was adopted in 2017, in which Realtor A listed a property and entered into the multiple listing service. Within a matter of days, another realtor produced a full price offer from a buyer. The offer specified that the buyer's offer was contingent on the sale of the buyer's current home. The seller, anxious to sell, accepted the offer, but instructed the listing realtor to continue marketing the property in hope that an offer that was not contingent on the sale of an existing home would be made. And again, this is happening right now where the seller is selling one property in order to be able to purchase another property. A week later, another realtor, cooperating broker working with an out-of-state transferee on a company-paid visit, contacted the listing realtor to arrange a showing of the seller's property. The property was shown, and the listing realtor said nothing about the previously accepted purchase offer with the contingency of selling the buyer's home. This is the second realtor showed the property, and they provided a purchase agreement for the full listed price and sent it to the listing realtor. The listing realtor informed the seller about the second offer, and at the seller's instructions, the first buyer was informed that the second offer had come in, and so the buyer for the original offer waived the contingency in his purchase offer, so the first offer stayed. The second offer that came in, also at a full price without the contingency, was then told that their offer had not been accepted. The second realtor, believing that the listing realtor's failure to disclose that there was existing a previous accepted offer, felt that that was a violation of Article 3 and filed an ethics complaint. At the hearing, the listing realtor defended his actions, noting that while the first offer had been accepted by the seller, it had been contingent on the sale of the buyer's current home, that it was possible that the buyer, if faced with a second offer, could have elected to withdraw from the contract. The listing realtor argued that continuing to market the property and not making other brokers aware that the property was under contract promoted his client's best interest by continuing to attract potential buyers. The hearing panel disagreed with the listing broker's justification, pointing to the specific wording of Standard of Practice 3-6, which requires disclosure of accepted offers, including those with unresolved contingencies. The listing realtor was found to be in violation of Article 3. Okay, so it's very important that we know and we understand what the Code of Ethics expects of us. Standard of Practice 3-7. When seeking information from another realtor concerning property under a management or listing agreement, realtors shall disclose their realtor status and whether their interest is personal or on behalf of a client, and if on behalf of a client, their relationship with that client. So agents cannot try to obtain information pretending to be buyers and calling unlisted property and asking questions as if they were buyers. We have an obligation to disclose that we are real estate professionals and that we are working either on our own behalf, if we're interested in the house for ourselves, or if we are working as a buyer's agent or a transaction broker. And that is what this is specifically intended to address. Standard of Practice 3-8. Realtors shall not misrepresent the availability of access to show or inspect a listed property. I mean, it should not happen. If the property is available, then it should be available for showings. If it's not available, then it should not be showing up as active. That's very, very clear and understandable. If it's active for showings. If it's not active, then it should be removed, either temporarily removed from the market. And sometimes we have that. We have a tenant that is not cooperating. We have a tenant that is, or a seller that is ill, a seller that left for vacation and did not leave any keys for access. If that's the situation, then the property should not be marked as active. But if it is active, it should not be saying that the property cannot be shown. There has to be a reason and an explanation or a specific time frame for showing the property. There's nothing preventing us from saying, okay, there's a tenant and the property can only be shown every other Thursday from 3 to 4. If that's the case, that is what is available. There's nothing else that can be done with that. As long as it is documented, and it is the reality and the truth. But to say it's not available when it's still showing up active, or is not available when it really is active and it's available for showings, but the agent does not want to have other people competing with themselves, is an absolute violation of the Code of Ethics. Standard of Practice 3-9. Realtors shall not provide access to listed property on terms other than those established by the owner or the listing broker. Now, this one is specifically about giving keys or access to codes to a lockbox to buyers or to anybody without the agent actually being there and present for that property. Or even showing up to a property. Oh, there's a lockbox. So giving themselves permission to enter the property without first having verified that it is available and that they have permission to enter the property. Just because the property has a lockbox, that is not a free-for-all. It does not give us 24-hour access to that property. We still have to follow the protocol, find out whether it's available for showings, what are the time frames, if there is a request for showing that is required. That's what this is all about. Standard of Practice 3-10. The duty to cooperate established in Article 3 relates to the obligation to share information on listed property and to make property available to other brokers for showing to prospective purchasers and tenants when it is in the best interest of the seller or landlord. Again, we cannot take it upon ourselves to decide who gets to show the property or who doesn't get to show the property. It's an obligation to cooperate. In Standard of Practice 3-11, realtors may not refuse to cooperate on the basis of a broker's race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. This standard of practice was added last year in 2020 in an effort to explain and expand on our obligation to cooperate with everyone equally and not discriminate against anyone, whether it is the agent, the company, or the buyers. So everyone should have free and equal access to look at the property, to view the property, to make an offer on the property, as long obviously as it is available for sale. I'm going to let me just take a quick look here. There was a case interpretation that was created back in November of 2019, specifically dealing with timing of commission negotiations. Because a realtor signed a listing agreement with the seller for the sale of a home. The home was priced at $1 million, and the property was put in the multiple listing service, offering a certain percentage of cooperative compensation. A realtor sees the listing and knows that it would be perfect for her buyers, but unfortunately is out of their price range. She discusses with the buyers, and they ask her to submit an offer of $900,000. The realtor explains the risks in submitting the offer so far below asking price, but the buyers are in love with the home and ask her to submit the offer anyway. The realtor submits the offer and the listing agent, the listing broker, discusses it with the seller. The seller is concerned about accepting an offer so far below the home's asking price. The listing realtor offers to reduce her commission as articulated in the listing agreement by 1% if the seller wants to accept the offer of $900,000 and ensure a quick sale. The seller agreed to accept the offer and reduce the commission paid out to the listing realtor by 1%. The listing realtor informed the buyer's agent or realtor C that their offer was accepted, but that the listing realtor is now being paid 1% less in commission. Listen, she explained, it seems like both of our clients are happy with the price if it means the sale moves quickly. Would you be willing to split the difference on my reduced commission and I pay you 0.5% less in cooperative compensation than I specified in the MLS? The selling realtor agreed to accept 0.5% less than the commission specified in the MLS. After closing, the realtor who sold the property filed an ethics complaint against the listing realtor, alleging violation of Article 3. And at the hearing of the matter, the selling realtor argued that by asking her to accept 0.5% less in cooperative compensation after the offer was submitted, the listing realtor was unilaterally modifying the compensation with regard to that transaction. The hearing panel disagreed and found no violation of Article 3, noting that Standard of Practice 3-3 specifically authorizes listing and cooperating brokers to enter into an agreement to change the compensation for a transaction at any time, as long as they both agree. The panel also noted that the selling realtor could have said no to the reduced commission, and in that instance, the listing realtor would have been obligated to pay the commission stated in the MLS. So again, it is not enough to know what the Code of Ethics states. It's more important to practice what you know. I thank you very much for spending this time with me, and I hope some of these cases, the case interpretations, as they happen in the real world, give you a better explanation of how to react. And if you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to reach out to me at the office. Have a fabulous day, and go out there and get some sales done. Bye.